the countenance altered, and his raiment was white and glistening. Okay, but also the Buddha. There are many occasions when he's known as the light of Asia. The Buddha's also been called Master. And there's a passage from a Lotus Sutra written around the third, just my microphone's in the way, sorry, the 3rd century. The Buddha emitted a light. Well, it's too late now. I don't know what's happened there. But again, there's many comparisons between Christ and Buddha. The precepts as well are very similar, which we'll go into in a minute. But if we look at when Jesus was born, there were 3 wise men. And I'm trying to take you into a bit of history, which is not really mentioned in the Bible, but it's mentioned in India and ancient books. And the connection between the 3 wise men of the Magi, they came from the East, and they had a duty to Mary and Joseph and Jesus. And I worked in Egypt, and there are churches which actually say the family came through Egypt. They were told to go to Egypt, and they took the young Jesus into Egypt with various Essene communities. Essene means the outsiders, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we know that the Essenes knew of Jesus, and Jesus certainly knew of them. And John the Baptist, we believe, was also an Essene. So they were trying to follow this esoteric religious philosophy, and it was derived from the Egyptian mysteries, which also were derived from the Indian Aryan Dharma, Aryan teachings. Dharma is teaching. So everything goes back to India, it seems. And when Jesus was about 3 years old, this was typical. The sages in India, it mentions in Matthew, they come to pay him homage and to establish a link of communication with him, because his destiny was going to be living most of his life with them. And in India, whenever a child reached the age of about 3 years old, the Ishanis always had a Brahmin Pandit come to their home. And the disciples of St. Thomas were usually referred to in India as Ishanis. There's a Russian guy called Nicholas Roerich. In his book Himalaya, a monograph said that according to the Tibetan scrolls he found in 1925, Isha was 13 when he left for India. And the Nathan, how can you pronounce that? Nathan Mavali of the Nath yogis said that Isha reached India when he was 14. How did he get there? Well, I'll show you the map how he did this. Prior to that, another Russian in 1894, Nicholas Notovich, published a book called The Unknown Life of Christ. I have that book. I've got my doubts on some of the things, the logic, the content. There's some questions I have, but he was a Russian doctor, and he journeyed extensively throughout Afghanistan and India. Then he went by train when he got to India, but what happened to him, he broke a leg and he stayed at this convent here. And he learned that there existed these ancient records of the life of Jesus Christ. But when he published his book, and a lot of people were against him publishing this book, he was accused of creating a hoax. And he was ridiculed as an imposter. However, there are many people afterwards who were skeptics, such as the Swami, who visited the convent, and he actually became convinced of the authenticity of Notovich. Now, the Silk Road went from the Middle East and Palestine. I worked in Egypt, never got to go to Palestine though, and I worked in India, Saudi Arabia, all these places, but I didn't know where the old Silk Road was. But apparently, this is the old road going to China. You know, Manichaeans, and all down that way. And Christianity went down this way, as we believe. So when Jesus went on his travels at 13, 14 to India, the idea, because of these Magis, they initiated Jesus into yoga practice and higher spiritual life, and they gave him the spiritual name of Isha, which means Lord, Master. And apparently he stayed at Ladakh and other monasteries like this, and he learned all the spiritual teachings. He did meditation. I think you'll find Jesus refers to meditation in the Feast of Sophia. When I was looking for it the other day, but I couldn't find it. It's But I remember in there, he actually says, be still. And also, this is in Psalm 46, be still and know that I am God. But he meditated in this cave, and as many people go to this cave in north of the present day Rishikesh, which is one of the most sacred locales of India. And some of you may remember the Beatles going there in the 60s. I mean, they came here with Maharishi to north of Llandudno, along the coast here to Bangor, and then they went up to India. And it was Rishikesh they stayed at. And for the last 30 years, it became dilapidated. The Maharishi died. And apparently the Indian government have actually renovated the place now because it has become a famous center once again. So Jesus lived in these various Buddhist monasteries in the Himalaya regions. And Notavish wrote something interesting in relation to St. Thomas. And he reckons the scrolls may have actually been written, spoken by St. Thomas. Now, the connection between Christianity and the Vedics, the Indian document scriptures, in the Gospel of John, it says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Vedic verse is very similar. In the beginning was Prajapati, and with him was the Word. And there's a reference below that. I'm only giving you a tip of the iceberg of all these sort of connections with the Vedics to Buddhism. Now, when you look at the secret Gospel of John, it implies, or actually says, he lived in the desert for 11 years after his crucifixion. And then he went to India. He was teaching his disciples for 11 years. And off he went back to India. Now, these are the people who actually say that's where he went after his crucifixion. And he was only on the cross for 2 or 3 hours. And some theories say he was resuscitated. You've got Pontius Pilate was a friend of his uncle, Joseph of Arimathea. And they took him to the burial chamber, and the 3 Marys actually treated his wounds and resuscitated him. And then he was off to the desert. It's interesting that the people who loved Jesus, and he loved the Indian people, but his own people, they didn't love him, you know, they actually crucified him. So he went back to India where he felt happy. Now, Judas Thomas was the twin. He was not just physically the twin, he was sent to India for the same spiritual empowerment, the same spiritual training. And you can see this in the Acts of Thomas, where Judas Thomas was sold to somebody to go to India. And he actually became the patron saint of India. And there's a picture I took of St. Thomas's Cathedral in Bombay there, and there's quite a few St. Thomas's all over the place, and St. John's in Calcutta, for example. So the name Thomas remains quite popular amongst the Christians, and he has a cave near Madras. I went to Madras, must be 20 years ago now. He has a cave there, and his church there as well. But it wasn't just Buddhism, it's also the Hinduism, the Vedic learning. And his teachings as a student was also, he traveled, and they moved him to Benares, which was one of the major centers of Vedic learning. Now, let me just have a look here. So he engaged in intense study of spiritual texts, such as the Sanatana Dharma, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita. And he quoted these in Israel when he got back. Now let's go back to Buddha. The Buddha became enlightened. It's all to do with the light at the age of 35, very similar to Jesus, who was 33. Now, there's many references that when he was enlightened, his body actually glowed. And he taught knowledge of the truth of Dharma to all. Jesus did the same thing. He was a revealer of knowledge and truth to help us on our path to salvation. And this is what he was doing with Nirvana, the Buddha. And this is the Buddhist map, how it spread from India. It went right across Japan, Korea, Tibet, Mongolia. The Buddhism in Japan is slightly different, and the same with the one in Tibet. But basically, it's Buddhism. Now, in Buddhism, there's 3 or 4 things which I note, and I'm always cross-referencing. Every religion I can see, it could be Zoroastrianism, it could be the Manichaeans, it could be most of the Christian texts and the Buddhists refer to the light. This is what everybody is after, the light kingdom. And they refer to the divine light. And the other one they refer to is rebirth in the human realm is rare in Buddhism. And so we need to use this experience in life to purify ourselves, our hearts, and seek salvation, nirvana. Detachment is important. And it's basically non-attachment to the usual objects of raga, sense pleasures. And I was told a joke by the Buddhist, if you send an email to a Buddhist monk, you cannot send any attachments. I think they find that funny as well. Okay, so very important, which is why Stephen's dog is wanting attention, because he's looking for merit. Animals apparently realize they can climb this consciousness level by getting good merit, by being a good dog or a good cat, okay? Because if we don't, and we go down the path of demerit or bad karma, we can end up like a dog or a spider, okay? Why? Because it's in this round of rebirth here. And it's all based on jealousy. Jesus, I think, probably you may tell me if I'm right or wrong, doesn't Jesus say jealousy is one of the very worst of sins? And the way the Buddhists connect it to is desire. So anything to do with our DNA, what we demand physically, the dark side of us will actually tempt us and lead us into demerit. And it will trap us into this round of rebirth. Now, it's not rebirth just in the Buddhism or Hinduism, it's also in Christianity, and it's mentioned in the Place to Sophia. So, and it's this desire at the time of our dissolution, our death, that determines what our next life will be, and that's in the Upanishads. And you can see here how the Buddhists define this realm. Our dissolution, you can go into the hell realm, state of unhappiness. This is why Buddhist monks will say, be happy. You can say, they'll tell you, just be happy. I committed sin, be happy. Do good karma. And that's their solution, because unhappiness is related to demerit. Happiness is merit. So we go in this circle. We can go into the Pita realm and animal realm, the hell realm. And in the Upanishads, it talks very much about that. And also in the Tibetan Buddhist Book of the Dead, it tells you a lot more. And I'll tell you in a minute. So they're saying in the Upanishads, those who are pure in heart, who practice meditation and conquer their senses and passions, shall attain the immortal self, i.e. salvation, source of all light and source of all life. That's in the Mundaka Upanishads. And this is very similar to Christianity, you know. We need to overcome our desires and senses. So, why? And so you'll find that this light and darkness, which coexist in the Place of Sophia, the arrogant lives in the 12th eon along with Sophia. So we have the darkness there along with Sophia. In Buddhism, the light and good, here we have the two statues, dark, evil. In Zoroastrianism, we have light, good. They're always fighting, and they're not. It's not a confrontation. If you look at Carl Jung, it's an interaction. The only way we can overcome the dark is with interacting with the darkness, not confronting it. And that's, I think, is also in one of Stephen Holler's books. So the connection, Isis Sophia, is a Gnostic text discovered in 1773. I think it was translated into English about 1856. And it was a document. They don't know who had it in the UK at the time, but it was sold and somebody bought it, and it came to be known. In there, this is just one page where it says "My Kingdom of Light." There are many pages to do with Kingdom of Light, the treasury of light, and how to get there. And Jesus actually says, because he's talking in the places to his disciples, it says, if you read it slowly and carefully, he will say on more than one occasion, in your pourings into different bodies of this world. That's on page 248. He means rebirth. He recognizes that we go through different bodies, and he's there to stop that. He's there to offer our salvation. He also mentions detachment on many occasions. He says, renounce the whole world and all the matter therein. And when he uses the words fast, it doesn't mean just stop eating. It means fast from the world, detachment. So, rebirth. The soul to escape from transmigrations into bodies until it hath given signs of being in its last cycle, according to its record of demerit. So Jesus tells his disciples about demerit and the effects on rebirth. So he says, saying 3 on the Gospel of Thomas, when you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. Ye are all from the same mixture, and that one's in Pisces Sophia. And if you look at the Upanishads, from within, may he, Shiva, in whom all are one, free us from the bonds of death. So that's just one, and it's the same with Buddhism, Hinduism, there's more quotations like this. We are all one. Now, this is an important subject because the Tibetan Book of the Dead actually tells us how we can navigate our way through the 6 stages of death. And this word wrath, the wrathful deities, and the peaceful ones, again, they're in our minds. And it's if we have fear, and this fear that controls us spiritually will lead us back into the round of rebirth. So fear is used spiritually, and it's used in this materialistic world to control us. So this is a poisonous energy, and the wrathful deities appear in this Book of the Dead. They tell you about it, and they represent the harmful karma that we create in our life. If we have fear about these, we're basically done for. So the whole idea of the Book of the Dead is to teach you, it's a natural phenomenon that occurs on death. And it actually shows you a way to ignore them and the direction to go, how to navigate so you don't go back into rebirth. Or if you want to go back, you want to come back as a human. So you should be able to, it's like an AA roadbook. But it's also in the Pisces Sophia, receivers of wrath will become terror-stricken with your knowledge of the light. And they have to comply with the regulations that lead forth our souls out of our bodies. They all have regulations. It's the same with the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead tells you fear is the weapon. And if you run from fear, it's reborn. We're reborn in one of the lower realms by a dog, a cat, a snake, a spider. But these are projections of our own mind, and they can do no harm. You need to be aware of that. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches how to get through these stages to avoid death. The dialogue of the Savior in Christianity, in Gnostic Christianity, this is just one instance. Fear is the power. It will engulf you. Jesus mentioned the lamp of the body is the mind. That's in the Upanishads. The light only the mind can see. Again, Jesus said, when you rid yourself of jealousy, i.e. desire, you will rule over these wrathful deities, these demons, and you will clothe yourself in light. So you become purified. And the purification is in the heart. According to the Buddhists and also deeper Christianity, this is where we have to, because this is where in the Upanishads, our salvation lies, where Shiva lies, is in the heart. So there's a lot of commonality here. Again, we have Buddhism, the Zoroastrians, well before the Buddhists. Some people say it goes back 8,000 years. But basically that formula, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, is what is the result of the world we live in today. Maybe bad thoughts, bad words, bad deeds, has the same but opposite effect. When we compare the 5 precepts in Buddhism to the 5 Manichaean commandments, in that good book that you told me to get, Pamela, we see they're very similar. Abstain from killing. Manichaean is no injure, no stealing. Buddhism, do not covet. Truth, no misconduct, purity of the body, no intoxication, purity of mouth. And there's a few other seals. The mouth is a seal, one of the 3, I think 3 or maybe at least 3 seals in the Manichaean books. So, Pisces Sophia, we're coming to the end now. What Jesus is saying, he says it more than once in different ways, but he's saying we should not cease day or night. We just carry on until we've found the mysteries of the kingdom of light, which will purify us and lead us into the kingdom of light. Be diligent and receive the mysteries of light and enter into the kingdom of light. Buddha actually says that to his disciples on his deathbed. Be diligent and strive for nirvana. Now, according to scriptures found in India, I've got 3 different ages that Jesus died. One was 140, one that's 50 years old, one 114, 120, one 125. The Indian government made a very good documentary on this. This is the place where there's a tomb of Jesus in there. He's not at this ground level, he's at a lower level. But his last words were, "I go to my Father now." And I noticed with interest when in Israel a few years ago, they said they found the bones of Jesus, so therefore he could not have risen. Well, Jesus wasn't talking about a physical resurrection. He's talking about spiritual, you know. So this is where his bones lie. This is the references I've used. This is only some of the references I've used. Okay, folks, thank you very much.
I have a question. Since I'm going to write, if you could keep this up here for a minute.
Yeah.
Nicholas Notovich, that was a new name for me. Was he the source for, do you remember like in the 70s, there was a book around called the Aquarian Gospels?
I remember the name of Aquarian Gospels. That was, it was slightly misleading, wasn't it? The content of Aquarian Gospels.
Yeah, it was, but, and there was like a movie about it too. And it was largely about Jesus in India.
Ah, well, maybe I was too young at the time. I don't know. Do you remember it, Steve?
Or Dave, you should have been kicking around those years. You're our age.
Thank you for that, Pamela. Yes, I confess in my increasing dotage that rings a bell, but it didn't really float my boat in those days, so I can't summon memories to the fore immediately.
I remember, like David, I remember it being around at the same sort of time as the Lopsang Rampa books, which were equally fictitious, arguably. But there is an interesting book which is quite rare, which is called the I think it's called the Jesus Sutras, which is about which is about some kind of Gnostic Christian texts that were influenced by Taoism. So you'll like that, Pam, because it probably links to some Manichaean things.
Yeah, I actually.
But those are quite scholarly, actually, and they reflect a kind of syncretism between Christianity and Taoism in China.
Yeah, I got a copy of that, and I guess I found it a little disappointing because his emphasis. He was talking about a lot of the same scriptures that a lot of modern scholars are attributing to Manichaeanism. And he was doing this sort of knee-jerk reaction that they were, you know, more Nestorian Christianity. And I think that's where, you know, and he never mentioned Manichaeanism once, which you know where how it plummeted on my scale then.
Yeah, he's suddenly in your bad books.
Yeah. But I think that's something, it's an interesting thing when Jesus goes to India, that you know, occasionally you still come across the Indian, you know, remnants of what was Nestorian Christianity. And they show up sometimes in like at the apostolic succession of some of us Gnostics and other independent movement groups. You know, simply because they also don't fall into a classification of, you know, what is Christianity or what was the original Christianity.
Yeah.
You know.
Certainly in Central Asia, my beloved Central Asia, the closer you get to China, the more Mani is described as the Buddha of light.
Yeah.
I've sort of noticed that. And the iconography shifts until you're dealing with a series of sort of semi-translucent, radiant figures. I mean, I was trying to rustle up some photographs and send them to everybody because it's breathtaking.
Yeah, it's interesting how much is coming out of China now about Mani, the Buddha of light, some of the ideas about Maitreya, of whether I read something recently and they were discussing that the whole idea of Maitreya as is important in Buddhism and even in Hinduism kind of starts coming out of whether it's Manichaeanism or whether it's out of this sort of messianic figure that was coming out of the more esoteric Zoroastrians, somewhere around, I think Mithras from the esoteric Zoroastrians is something like 300, 400 BC, where that starts, and of course it gets picked up by the Jews and then eventually into Christianity. Big time, but the names, Mithras, Maitreya, even Mani.
Dave, you mentioned you had some interesting photographs. I wonder if you could at some point share them on. We have a Gnostic Cafe group on WhatsApp. There's a lot of people around different places around the world would like to see those.
Oh, I'll be delighted. I mean, I've sort of been to Central Asia many times for a number of reasons, and taking the odd and curious snap here and there. I'll need to see. I've recently moved, Warren, so I'll have to find where I put them. But yes, I'll certainly do that. I'll certainly do that.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah,
That'd be great. Yeah, I guess there's still a temple that's attributed to Mani too, from the old from that had just kind of managed to exist in some form, in China. It's down in the far southeast corner would be.
Well, I mean, there are tales of whole libraries that were shredded. I tried to get permission because I've got a certain amount of clout over there, but not enough to get to see what's left. I mean, I was trying to put more effort into that. I projected a program. I sent a proposal for a TV program, a TV documentary to some friends of mine in the Kyrgyz government. And the minute they realized what the subject matter was, I was nearly shown the door. But I think there's a lot of material over there, pure Gnostic material, that they just don't know what to deal with. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know what to do with it. And it's becoming almost an embarrassment because they want to do something, but they don't really know how to channel that through. When you're dealing with Shia, you're dealing with forms of Islam that aren't aggressive. You're dealing with very gentle Shia-based forms of Islam normally. But it's not so much a confrontation with the powers that be. The mullahs don't know what to do with it. So do we give access to people or not? If we do, does that mean endless tourists destroying everything? So it's an interesting dilemma. But I think, the Gnostic part of me has never been let down by that part of the world. And it's something I must put now I'm part of this group, must put my thinking cap on about, because obviously we'll see where we can go with it. So,
I mean, when you go down this path of this discovery, for those years that Jesus was not in Palestine, in his hometown, 13 years old, they tend to get married, 13, 14 years old. But it seems to me from what other people have said in India, it's that age when he took a walk along the Silk Path, and he could have gone to China, because the Muslims actually say he was the greatest traveler I think that's in the Quran, that Jesus was a greatest traveler. I mean, we all know that he came to England. That's what we think, with his uncle. Now, he may have even come also to Llandudno in the Welsh coast, because here they have a very old copper mine. They say it goes back 4,000 years. You can go and visit it. It's on the horn sticking out. And they know that this copper, merchants actually took it down the Mediterranean. They found this in Iran, in Syria, this quality of copper. So why not? Because Joseph was a merchant. So yeah, I can well imagine he walked along this path. And there's some stories when he walked along the path, he never used a comb. He wanted to travel light, so he used his fingers. So we know he had hair. Now, it wouldn't have been short hair; it would have been long hair. Why? Well, otherwise, why use your fingers? And he didn't use a cup; he used his hands. We also, some scriptures say, he was fair skinned. I think that's in some Syrian text. They give a description. He was a fair skinned Essene, okay, as opposed to Buddha, who was tanned. So there's some descriptions there, which it's just wonderful to find out these little bits of information all the time. The more you start digging, you find out more and more. Wonderful. So I can well believe he went to China, all over India, not just once. Once he developed his spiritual heights above anybody else, and he got purification and became the Christ, he went back to try and teach it to his own people, but they didn't accept it. And after that, he went back to India, and that's where he died. He spent more of his life in India than he did anywhere else. They reckon 60 years around India. I mean, the curries are good, aren't they? Good old Indian curry. Can't resist that.
But I think it does kind of raise an interesting question as well, thinking about now, about how we think about kind of contemporary Gnosticism and how we depict Gnosticism to other people, who might be interested in it. Do we depict it as a slightly strange form of Christianity, or are we much more thinking about it in terms of a form of metaphysical philosophy, much more like Buddhism, that's kind of answering quite deep existential questions? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's almost the question facing modern Gnosticism. We had this, there's like in the modern incarnation of the church going back, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was radical enough to just have, be doing these masses that were a bit of a little tweak with a little bit more performance on liberal Catholic or other sort of liberal sacramental Christian rites. But now, as we all have, as everyone has started to, who's a seeker at all, has started to realize all these different, these different paths, these different looks, these different techniques around ascension and to achieving gnosis, to just kind of put the blinders on and follow a straight and narrow their sort of more Christian path with a little bit of weirdness, as you said, Steve. That seems a bit blind to me, or at least not achieving the full potential of what could be.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be either or, does it?
No.
You could still retain sacramental forms, but I know David and I are both big fans of the Quakers, and Quakerism as well provides a really interesting, quite Gnostic way of sitting with silence and receiving Christ consciousness within, and I find that a really fascinating kind of approach to Gnosticism, a slightly different language around it, but again, I think all these things can be incorporated in the spiritual work that we do together.
Yeah.
I notice when I'm talking about Gnosticism to my own MCC group, sometimes we get visitors of obviously evangelical proportions, and they've all taken to it rather well, which is the weird thing. I asked someone not too long ago what they thought of what we were doing, and got the reply, "Oh, it's Christian Buddhism," you know, in this matter-of-fact sort of way,
Yeah.
and didn't know what to say back, because that was that sorted, so there wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I found the same with many people who are Christians. They go to church on a regular basis, but they also go to the local Buddhist temple. Yeah. And because they say the reason is they go there is because of meditation. They're saying it doesn't exist in Gnosticism, but it does. If you look in the, which I mentioned, the Pisces Sophia, Jesus implies that by telling them, be still. I need to find where it says that. So it is implied, but it's only very quickly and very subtle. What would be interesting to me, and I think, Pamela, you're not the only one. I know the guy in Norway, William, who's a friend of Terry, of Turge, is interested in sacraments, and he's a Manichaean. He follows, he went to China for 1.5 years. He has a lot of knowledge. I need to get him back on here. Now, I'm sure when I was in India, I went to see a dance in Bombay in the theatre there. It's the only opera theatre that's left in India. And I went with a Parsi guy who's the head of the council, and we watched Indian dancing. And these are spiritual dances, but I'm sure there's a significance of these in terms of some sort of ritual. It's the same when I was in Egypt. You know, you may have seen these dances, what they do, the belly dance, but they have like a Sufi flavor to them, a spiritual flavor, creating like a vortex around the person. You know, and my wife was at a Russian Orthodox church for Easter just the other day. Father Daniel, now Father Daniel is in Blind Alfistiniad. He looks like Merlin. If you can imagine Merlin the wizard, he's got this long pointed beard. He'd be about 80 years old. She said people were in tears with the burial of Christ. He had such a power of bringing that electromagnetic field, the divinity down. It affected everybody. And people come to see Father Daniel for tuition. They watch what he's doing. So he's quite a celebrity around here. So he's doing these sacraments. So it's the sacraments. I wonder what Indian sacraments we could, because you notice one in the Manichaean book, in this book here.
Yeah.
So I wonder what we can learn from the Indians. David, maybe you've been around there. Maybe you've noticed one or two things on their rituals.
well, I mean, you know, there's no strict division between sacred and profane in the way there is in the West. I mean, you know, the arts side of what I do, everything is an offering to something higher, whether it's just inbuilt into the sort of psyche of the area, you know, even if it's purely aesthetic, whatever a phrase like purely aesthetic would actually mean, it's an offering. So, yeah, I mean, there are one or two dances. I recall when I was in Azerbaijan, and I've never managed to get one to this part of the world, the Ashik singers, bold women who go around, and it's thousands of years old, with, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the instrument. I think it's like a saz, but it's not a saz. You know, that one of the prototypes of the guitar. And they can say whatever they want. They've got a sort of status of a medieval court jester. You know, it's sacrilege to touch them, and they turn up and say whatever they want. And the last time I was out there, I said, you know, but surely somebody must take umbrage every now and again, and they admitted they do. But you know, it's a sacred thing. It's a sacred thing. And I think that's certainly true of India. Certainly, if I'm looking at Azerbaijan going forward, you know, through Central Asia, the endless combinations of sacred and profane reach a level of complexity that I think is unknown in the West.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm really, oh great, David starts downloading on his first group meeting. You know, I think we're too hard on the West so much and so often. I mean, if you go to India, you know, they don't have time for spirituality. A lot of people are starving. Therefore, what are they focusing on? They're focused on getting a meal and getting sustenance coming in. That's what they're focusing on. You know, and in the West, our karma has allowed us, potentially at least, to think, right, okay, now I can think these spiritual and abstract thoughts. I mean, let's not be too hard on ourselves. But at the same time, let's not be too, in my humble opinion, you know, judgmental of what we think we find over there. I mean, most of the anthropological studies I've looked at, I don't have much time for that type of material. I literally mean in terms of time, you know, not in sense of taste. They ride roughshod over the blending of sacred and profane. I mean, certainly if I'm in a country like Kazakhstan, there is right. This isn't to upset Pamela. I love Pamela to bits. You know, there's a caricature of what the Manichaeis think. You know, sacred, profane, sacred, profane, sacred, profane, and it's a caricature, obviously. But I notice that type of thinking simply doesn't exist in Kazakhstan. You know, if I try to talk about what they mean by a purity ritual, you know, Bismillah after a meal, and, you know, so is it an offering? No, it's not an offering. Is it a prayer of thanks? No, it's not a prayer of thanks. You know, are you trying to find some sort of, you know, union with Allah? No, we're not trying to do that. And, you know, I just think the endless subtlety when you get to that part of the world, because it's rejected that type of false Manichaean duality, you know, everything's on the verge of a combination with something else. And it's, you know, what they seem to have at the core of their own spirituality is an innate ascendancy. Everything's on the verge of ascending all the time. And that's how you reach Allah. You know, and they, you know, I've noticed, I get patted on the back as one of the tribe and told to sit down and shut up. You know, if they get other clergy, yes, that's, you know, they'll turn and say, yes, that's exactly right, Father. Yes, that's exactly right, Reverend. Because they can't be bothered to explain it. So I just think we've got to be very sensitive to the I don't know, the sophistication in even having a meal, let alone the arts. The Ashik singers are a perfect example of aesthetics pointing beyond itself to something else. So when we get to traditional Hindu dance or Tibetan dance, I remember the first time, gosh, I was in Moscow and I bumped into these Tibetan monks. They were all these short, squat, very healthy looking guys that clearly didn't realize they were stood in Red Square and clearly didn't realize what it was. So we all went for tea. I mean, that was quite nice. But, you know, they would say to you very, very clearly, you've got to look at the temple arts as magical evocatory practice. You know, the artistry of the art is a sacred mechanism. It's not an aesthetic mechanism on its own. Does that make any sense to anybody? I don't know if I'm rambling or not at the minute. You know, so yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have, you know, do I have that division? You know, if I remember seeing the movie Fame, you know, and all these young people, poor young people dancing out of a drama school, surely that's spirituality. I mean, they've all found hope, they've all found joy, they've all found aspiration. So I'm sort of on the side of the Central Asians in that I can't really see what we're getting at half the time. You know, I remember, God, I'm trying to think of the last, all these lockdowns are getting to me. You know, what was the last theatrical piece I went to see? I remember somebody outside saying, oh, that was just a performance. You know, what does that mean? So certainly in Central Asia, that wouldn't exist. And you're always looking at a finger pointing upwards. So yeah, you know, I think to round off, people who go to those parts of the world looking for the secret within the art have already missed the point. You know, is it a good dance? There we are. Is that guy a good acrobat? There we are. You know, I confess I'm in my dotage. That's the second time that word's come up. I'm getting this more Zen-like view of everything. You know, I remember, what was it, the 10th patriarch, the 8th patriarch, 2 monks from Tibet had run to his monastery in Japan. Forgive me for, I can't remember, I'll look it up for everybody. And they rush up to him, you know, Master, is there life after death? And he looks them in the eyes and says, I believe it's going to be a beautiful morning. And they say, is there a God? You know, where are we aiming? You know, where are we aiming in life? And he says, the kitchens are still open. If you go there now, we'll serve you breakfast. You know, but how can that not be a spiritual response? I suspect, oh, I'd love to take you all to Central Asia. We'll have to plot some sort of Gnostic outing over there. Let me see what resources as I say, I've literally just moved to my brother's home. Let me see, because everything's everywhere. Let me see what resources I've got hanging around, and we'll all have a chinwag about them, because the artistry and the art is the transcendence. Now I'll shut up. There we are.
Very informative. Thank you, David. I mean, that's a brilliant tour we've just done with you. I've really enjoyed that tour.
I love that. I love that saying that everything's always pointing upwards.
Yeah.
And isn't that sort of, yeah, it's the dualism. I think we're talking about, I think it's a dualism that we're coping with getting away from. That's been looking for that sort of that sort of oneness of spirit and being. You know, I think that's what a lot of people even use the term when they talk about Celtic spirituality. They're talking about that unity of spirit and action and being and all that.
And I think, kind of going back to the theme of art and Gnosticism, I think, you know, that, and I think Stefan Hoeller writes quite well about this, is that the revival in Gnosticism after the 60s is best captured in things like the writing of Philip K. Dick, or the paintings of Leonora Carrington and the Surrealists. So for me, they embody something profoundly Gnostic, you know, beyond what's written in books.
Oh yeah, I'm an incredibly booky person. I think you all know that. But we've got to look beyond the book. We've got to look beyond the book.
Yeah, the Upanishads actually say that. It said, you know, the scribe or the people who study the scriptures shall not reach salvation. Yeah. That is not the way. That's the knowledge. But then there's other things you need to do. So yeah, we have to go beyond the book. But it's nice. It's a great read. It touches me inside. It brings a smile on my face. It gives me joy. But yeah, we have to do more practice. You know, and that's the experiential. This is why rituals, sacraments, meditation is important.
Well, I loved what you said about the Orthodox priest. I've been asked to give a talk to the Theosophists, the European esoteric school. I can't remember what they said. Because I noticed the other day, I mean, I've got a love of orthodoxy. I'm not Orthodox, obviously, you know. But it just struck me out the blue a couple of weeks ago that Madame Blavatsky actually was devoutly Orthodox, and nobody ever talks about it. And it's actually in the secret doctrine. If anybody, right, the risk of sounding like a bad boy, you know, Aleister Crowley's crack at theosophy, which I loved. They talk a lot about yoga and they do nothing, you know, paraphrasing, which is a bit hard on them, but, you know, you get the point. You know, I mean, she is assiduously loyal to the types of mystical liturgy she says she witnesses. I don't mean anything, you know, in secret monasteries or churches. You know, the fact that it's innately mystical and it's beautiful, and that needs to be respected in its own right. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually a great lover of orthodoxy, and yes, I really appreciated what you had to say about the Merlin figure, because I can, and the way some of them actually, I mean, it's incantationary. It's not simply prayer as Western churches know it. There's something else going on. You know, that's a reification of art into the sacred. And yeah, I was very appreciative of that. I thought that was a very good observation.
Well, yes, Father Daniel, now Easter is over, he's invited me to take a tour around North Wales with him to visit all the sites of the saints, which is a great honor. I mean, he's from here, from the mountains. So I'm looking forward to that tour, and I will record that and I'll put it on the Gnostic Cafe. He has also, he's not just a priest, he's a monk. He's never been married, he lives by himself. There's a special terminology, Pamela. David, what's the terminology now?
Is he a Hiro monk?
No, there's another word you use.
Oh, it's some sort of hermit. I can't remember the word offhand. This sort of huge Russian word.
Yeah, he's very well known, very well respected, and you know, he's well read. So I suspect. I mean, when I talk to Anglican priests, vicars who change to Orthodoxy, they will say one thing to me: yes, we are paid, and we get paid for this job. Doesn't mean to say they believe in it, but that's what happens. And I think with Father Daniel, he must have Gnostic knowledge, because his right-hand man, a deacon, Glyn, who's also Welsh, he speaks Russian, but he doesn't know what he's saying. During the service, they go from English, Welsh, Russian, and Glyn, he will do the English and Welsh, and he'll do the Russian. Now, Father Daniel has taught him Russian, but he doesn't understand what it means. He's got the pronunciation word for word in a book that he has to read it. He knows how to read it, but he doesn't know what it. He must have an idea what it means. And I think Father Daniel, his extensive knowledge, he will know about the lost gospels. For at least he must know about that, because Glyn has told me he himself is personally interested in Gnostics. So I suspect they both are, but that's what they do, you know.
I suspect Mount Athos is actually the last bastion of open Gnosticism, to be honest. I mean, some of the way some of the monks behave there, and the way they segregate themselves even from the other monks, to, you know, they become hesychasts. I've never managed to trace the root of that word, but all of a sudden you start thinking, well, hang on, it's got all the attributes of Gnostic. You've gone into some sort of symbolic retreat that the other monks leave you alone to achieve this higher consciousness. I mean, how much more? So no, they're not calling themselves Gnostics, but of course the accusation of those who were jealous of the treasures of Athos, which have been many, you know, Turkish rulers, Russian rulers. I mean, if anyone wanted to start a Barney, and that happened century after century, it was always, oh right, they're Gnostics, let's go and attack them and take all their money. You know, the fact that they've got away with it and they still practice those things, I think we need to focus on them too a bit more. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's an undercurrent in the Russian Orthodox Church, which somehow most of the other churches, Western churches, simply don't have. I mean, personally, I put that down to Orthodox people being Platonists at the end of the day, you know, and the Catholics, I'd say, are Aristotelians, so they're not really in the same mystical mode. But you know, that's why I think you can get away with that maybe in Orthodoxy. But if you're a Church of England, you know, if you're an Anglican priest, you won't be able to get away with it. And you found yourself picking your cards up at the end of the month.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mention Plato.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things, you know, throughout, you know, in your talk, Lord, when you were talking about all the emphasis on light, there's been some work by Stephen Flowers, Arthur Verlies, and others who've started to really take seriously some of the statements by the, you know, 2nd and 3rd century Greeks, who were quick to point out that they were part of an initiatic line that came from Plato. In actually looking at evidence of Plato being a mystical Gnostic-like, you know, spiritual initiatory system. And I would think some of them, because you certainly had more Platonism going into, the Eastern Orthodox and the West,
Yeah. But
think
it's
this
like
all
Isaac
sense.
Newton said, he said, I stood on the shoulders of giants. And with Plato, I detect a lot of his understanding came from the Zoroastrians.
Mhm.
There was a case where Plato, Socrates, one was a student, one was a teacher. Who was the other one? There were three of them. One committed suicide because he was forced to.
That would be Socrates.
Yeah, Socrates and Plato, and they were given. They tried to define what a human being is, and their definition was it's a corpse with a soul. You take the soul out of the human being, you have a corpse. Now, I also read that in Zoroastrianism. It's very similar, and that goes back a few thousand years before Plato. So, some of these Greek philosophers have actually, they go back further, they go back into Persia. And, you got the Sanskrit language as well, and it's all coming from India. I think the spiritual center of the world was around the Aryan race, the Hindus, all around that part of India, maybe the Tibetan mountains. A lot of this spiritual knowledge came from there. And where did it come from? They say a lot of it came from meditation. Where did they get this knowledge from? As a scientist, I get the knowledge by doing experiments or doing mathematical calculations. But they've got such wonderful knowledge, and it's always amazed me, where's it come from? I may be wrong in my conclusion, but the gravity of this is further east than Palestine, not just Palestine, there's a lot of spiritual truth, Dharma, around that big center.
Yeah, I think you're, my own thought, and from what I've read, is that the source of so much of this, is from India. Even you look at the names in the Bible of Abraham and Sarah, obviously Sarai and Brahman. And then from what I've read of actual Zoroastrianism, that Zarathustra himself had, that the prior to him, it had been more of a sort of barbaric animal sacrifice sort of religion. And it was his travels, again, probably from India, where he's bringing this idea of a more transcendental and a higher level deity. And then, of course, you get into the whole symbology around fire, which the Manichaeans saw as an element, or not as an element, but as a being, similar to water, similar to plants, and light, that had to be respected.
It's interesting because one of the elements of building our spiritual temple, what we call for, is these four lords of the regions of the earth. One is fire, but there again, fire can also be translated to be wisdom. When Jesus says, I do not come down, I come down and I will burn, I will set fire to the world. Is he meaning I'm going to actually put wisdom right throughout the whole world? So this fire meaning, has he got two meanings in this respect?
Yeah. And that's going to give us our segue into the Pentecost idea of the Holy Spirit and fire and such next time.
Dinah, what do you reckon so far? Let me ask you.
Yeah, she's quiet.
You're too quiet. We need to tap into you. I'm sorry, can't. I'm not being cruel, but let's find out.
I just find it all interesting, and it's to learn that Jesus, lived in India. It's all new information, but I think what got me was the book about reading. I remember I remember when I was at a point in my development that you know, it goes beyond reading books. Knowledge goes beyond reading books. So that really, yeah, stuck out for me. But everything, it's all, it's all overwhelm of information that I know, but I don't know too.
There's two good documentaries on Jesus in India. One, the Indian government actually financed one, and I can't remember if the BBC did one. One of the rarely good things they do are documentaries. So it's well worth looking into those too.
Yeah.
See, I don't know if anybody's read the book by Notovich, the Russian guy, 1894, when he published his book where he says that Jesus went to India. He's seen the scriptures by the Buddhist monks. Because other people have been there and said the Buddhist monks, the same ones, they went 14 years later, deny that Notovich has been there. And when you read the book of Notovich, and I read it and I think, no, this is fake. That there's certain things that don't ring true to me. But there are other people who are well respected, and there's a lady in the 1960s went there, another lady in the 1930s, and then a few guys. So, but I believe that Jesus did go to India. It's just that Notovich's story is not convincing. There's too many holes in it. It doesn't read right. You know, when you get that feeling about something, it's genuine. There's certain aspects of it which don't appear to be genuine, even though he may be telling the truth, you know. But I think on the whole, that's where, because Thomas was sent to India, and because he was a lookalike for Jesus, apparently the two of them physically looked the same, and they were mistaken many times in India, according to the scriptures, walking around. They thought it was Thomas, or they thought it was Jesus. I think he went there. It's nice to be in a place where you feel some spiritual empowerment. And I didn't go to Rishikesh. I was so near many times, but I just didn't do it. And I regret things now because I can't see a point in the future where I can go again.
I mean, certainly, I don't know that particular gentleman. I know the works of Roerich, Nicholas Roerich, very well. I was actually on the verge of doing a documentary about him. You know, final contracts and everything collapses at the last minute, yada, yada, yada. Because the Theosophical Society in Moscow can't find an entry for his membership. And then I think it was because his paintings they're either in New York or they're in Moscow. The Americans disagreed with the Russians about whether he was a member or not. You know, so then you'd have to go through endless reams of secondary material. You know, did he ever attend a meeting of the TS? Did it mean he was a member? You know, so the whole thing rather, let's say, stalled because he's worth revisiting. Certainly, in terms of Roerich's travels, you know, this hugely historically significant pilgrimage, for want of a better word, they're not simply trips. He saw echoes of Christian spirituality absolutely everywhere. And you know, I think he's a very reliable source. He's respected in Russia to this day. And if someone like that is saying, look, you know, I'm not going out of my way to discover this, but it's there and I'm seeing it, that must be taken very, very seriously. I mean, he was made one of the, right, so he's not a communist as far as I know, but he was made a hero of the people, even though he's an open esotericist, which is not bad going in anybody's books. So you're going to think, well, if he's in the middle of the Himalayas and he sees echoes of Jesus, that is fascinating and needs revisiting on, you know, on the level of increased documentation. The other guy, don't know, Warren. I mean, I'm going to look him up.
David, just give me a moment. I'll get the book. But can you see on the screen in front of you?
Yeah.
Who's in
Yeah.
India?
Yeah.
This guy, 1890, is a Muslim, and he's living in British India at the time. He's got this 171-page book about Jesus in India, and actually is quite a neutral type of writer. He's coming at it without well, he's got opinions in there, but based on. Let's just have a look at the content page to show you, because I've gone through this before. So this was originally written in Urdu. It's an English translation. He talks about the Jews, the Muslims, the Buddhists. Jesus went to Kashmir because he went after the Israel tribes that were lost. This is, and you can find his tomb in Srinagar. So this is Mirza, and so what year is this now? So it was published in 1908, but I think he started writing this in the 1890s. You can see many editions there, but let's have a look at the content of this. Okay, so he looks at evidence from the Gospels. He looks at evidence from the Holy Quran. He does a full literature review. You know, he's not a scientist. I don't think he is. He talks about the ointment that they used on, what Mary used on Jesus to resuscitate him, treat his wounds. He tells you what type of ointment it is. You can still get it today. He's looking at historical records, evidence from Islamic literature. He tells you about the journey he made, evidence from the Buddhist records, which is very interesting. He does a comparison with Buddha, Jesus and Buddha. It's a bit like Marcion doing his comparison between the God of the Old Testament and the Father. So he looks at historical writings. A very interesting book. And that's, I don't think are there any pictures in here? Let's have a quick look. I go through, I'm sure we all go through these books and take them apart. So he signed that 1899. And I found there's many old books like this, which we disregard, we don't bother looking into, because it's like if you do a PhD, they always want you to look into the latest research, you know, but there's hidden gems in this type of written book, if you can still get it. Yeah. I'll just go and get that book on India. I'll just, okay, give me a second.
Your main interest is Manichaeism, Pamela.
Well, it's been one of my interests for quite a while. Yeah, I think one of the things that got me interested in Manichaeism initially was just the idea that that it lasted so long in China, and that you've got a group that you've got almost this parasitic priest culture. So how did you have this communal lifetime supporting this last for so long? They must have been getting something. And it's not clear when you read the propaganda against them. So as I've started delving into it more, really realizing that one reason they lasted so long, really until the Ming Dynasty in China, was because once they ran into the Taoists, they realized they had this home. Because as Manny teaches, like it's in the Gospel of Philip, you know, nothing is truly, you know, good or bad in this world. Everything has a bit of each of it. And that's how kind of the Manichaeans saw it. It wasn't this strict dualism. It was that this was mixture, and we have to emphasize the light over the darkness, but still there is this mixture of both. And of course, Taoism is the same thing. So I have a good friend who's a Taoist, and so I'm constantly kind of, you know, keeping my ear open and trying to look for little remnants of you know, Taoist behavior, Taoist exercises that might have some Manichaean roots. But my background is I'd gotten involved interested in Gnosticism, really going back to even before I got to the university and was studying Jung. And then I got involved with the Gnostic Church eventually in the 90s when I was living outside near Chicago. And I was ordained in, oh, I just celebrated an anniversary. I just celebrated my 20th anniversary as in the French Gnostic Church.
Oh, congratulations. Wow.
So yeah, so I've been around a while. But you know, so I'm interested in other things, and I'm interested in Platonism, and especially a lot of the work of Henry Corbin too. And but yeah, special stuff for around the Manichaeans, I guess.
David, what is your interest?
Oh gosh.
It sounds so comprehensive, so diverse. I mean, my interest is quite diverse. It's wherever the knowledge takes me, where the truth is, and I'm searching all the time.
I've been interested in Gnosticism since my early teens, which sort of started with strong feelings of a vocation. I'm actually a Metropolitan Community Church Oasis pastor. I never, therefore, every time I hear something like sexual impurity, I start getting on my soapbox as an activist. Those concepts didn't exist, you know, that sort of stuff. No, I've never seen Gnosticism as separate from Christianity, and that's got me into trouble sometimes. But more often than not, no. I think my trouble with certain Gnostics is that they assume there's a tension and then tension arises. I mean, certainly MCC in the States are fascinated by the fact I'm an ordained, a consecrated Valentinian bishop. And that took years. I mean, I was going to Young Club in London for years and got in touch with the Valentinians in Italy. And it took a lot of convincing for me that they were the real thing. It eventually, you know, how far do historical documents go? You know, what does it mean? Right, so I've got a PDF in front of me. What on earth does that mean? You know, I'm not a historian. So they convinced me eventually that they were what they said they were. I was consecrated in an Italian monastery, believe it or not, which they don't want broadcast, but that's the fact of it. So I don't know.
That would be in North Italy, would it? Your consecration was in North Italy, not
yeah. More than that, I can't say because I promised. Yeah. Right, my trouble with Italian Gnosticism is that it's paranoid before anybody's opened their mouths. You know, give people a chance. You know, let them at least say they disapprove. Yeah. So, and it was wonderful. I mean, all during this spectacularly beautiful consecration, they had no nerves whatsoever. The minute I set foot back in England, you know, you mustn't tell anybody who your consecrators were. So I know my great-grandparents and I know my grandparents, and I'm not allowed to say who the immediate family is because they got cold feet, which is ridiculous. But, you know, things are as they are. It is what it is. No, I suppose the answer to that is I don't see this great division. And if I talk about it calmly and rationally to MCC pastors, at least the ones I've had the chance to talk about it to, they think, oh, well, that's interesting. It's you know, an unusual form of Christian meditation. It's Christian yoga. So I can't say I've had this, you know, right, there's a gag here, Manichaean struggle, you know, between Christianity and Gnosticism. I know some people have, so please don't think I'm making light of that. I know some people have had some terrible times, but you've got to start asking yourself, I think, you know, what were the people who were trying to cause the trouble motivated by? And I don't mean my fellow Gnostics were at fault. I just mean maybe if you're looking for a fight comes your way. And we've got to be very careful of that. So yeah, I know of the French lines. I deeply respect the French lines. My own Italian lines are very suspicious of the French lines But
Of
since they're,
course.
yeah, of course, and since they're paranoid about everything, their opinion isn't as respected on those matters as it used to be. No, I think we've got to be a little more robust. I mean, you know, I've said in innumerable places, even from the pulpit, this isn't an age of faith. This is an age of knowledge. You know, this is our time. And the fact that, you know, meetings like this are taking place at all is a real sign of what the zeitgeist is doing and what the Holy Spirit wants at this time. You know, I was saying to a Jesuit friend of mine recently, believe it or not, who's you know, an old friend of mine, 29 years, does he want me burnt at the stake or not? Well, if he does, he's certainly taking the long route, isn't he? I mean, 29 years later. I think, you know, the age of competing cosmologies is well and truly gone. All these astrophysicists turned up.
Yeah.
So if we're not looking at physical cosmogonies and we're looking at something more Jungian and we're looking at something internal and we're looking at inner space as opposed to outer space, then I think, you know, I don't see why we can't talk to mainstream church, and I don't see why we can't talk to the scientists, and I don't see why we can't talk to each other and be less worried about French lines and Italian lines and who wiggled their finger at you on a particular Saturday. You know, all of that's gone, and it's time to think, right, we've come of age. Gnosticism has come of age, and the picture we have of Christ is so much more elegant and beautiful and loving and intelligent that, you know, shame on us if we're not sharing that. So, you know, it's been a sheer joy meeting all of you this evening, and your talk was a sheer joy, Warren. You know, let's get thoughts going, let's get reading going, and let's really explore this until the truth comes out, because I'm sure we can do that. Right, I'm shutting up again. There we are.
Oh, wonderful, David. Wonderful. You know, you took, that's it, Steve. You're taking the dog a walk.
Yeah, I'm timing out. The dog has got the better of me. So yeah, I'll see you all soon. Take care.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks very much.
bye-bye, Dave.
Bye, Dave.
Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a challenge on our hands though, because if people are familiar with one type of belief system, whether they've been NLP'd over the years, very difficult. And I'm not out to convince anybody. It's a self-discovery. It's an inner awareness that happens when you put logic together. And I told Pamela there's a little cafe here in Llandudno called Haven Cafe. Now, the lady is Christian. She's always wanted the cafe. She called it Haven Cafe because it's heaven. You take the letter E out and you've got Haven Cafe. And I go there as a mental break about 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. I take a good Gnostic book with me, Upanishads, or the one that Pamela's just told me to get, or the Manichaean body I'm going through. And I'll highlight that. All my books have got highlights in, little gems of knowledge. And there's a priest who goes there. Now, his name is Gareth. He's a tall Welsh guy. He's got some American lineage. I forget which church he belongs to, but it's some Anglican church from America going back to about 1890. And he won't look out at anything outside the Bible. He said, it's all in the Bible. That's all you need to know. I said, but it isn't all I need to know, because it's not just me who, I haven't found this information without archaeologists, scientists who from Oxford University or Belfast, all sorts of people, very respectable research scientists are going after ancient knowledge. It's just like the pyramids. And they've revealed this to us. So it is our duty to look at this knowledge and see how it changes our model of the world or a spirituality. If we can learn something, it's good. But he keeps saying, no, it's all in there, and he's constrained himself. So he calls me his little heretic friend. So I don't mind, but he always sees me with a book. I always put it down on the table. I sit down with him, we have a good chat. And it is very entertaining, actually. Some of the things he does, there's a little steam train that goes across the hills in North Wales. So he sometimes works on there. He does church work, of course. But he's quite a character, but he's like that. He's blinking. And the only exposure he gets, but I'm sure he knows, is when I come up with a different book. I mean, I came up with the Leadbeater book. the science of the sacraments. And I said, you know, Gareth, this is exactly what you do at the altar. You're using electromagnetism to bring down divinity. Where are you getting that information from? I said, here, they'd be, oh, no, go away with it, you know. But the thing is, he can tell a good story, and his main theme is what our main theme is. It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I said, well, if you're not interested in the story around that, other stories, that's the main theme. And that's what we try to talk about. We find a commonality, don't we?
Yeah.
My nickname at university was the heretic. I hope I've lived up to that through the years. My other half is nagging me that we've got to go. I'll just say one thing, I suppose. I'd agree with your clerical friend that it was all in the Bible if they hadn't removed the Gnostic Gospels.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we can put them back, maybe we can start saying it's all in the Bible.
Yeah, I will use that phrase. Yeah, I will agree with you, Gareth, if he didn't remove the Gnostic Gospel.
Yeah, we'll have to dig out the list of what was the original, the original group that they were considering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friends, I've got to go. It's been a sheer joy meeting you all. I assume it's the same group every month?
Yeah, we're about every 2 weeks we try. So 2 weeks from now, and we'll be doing something on the Spirit, Holy Spirit, the Rosh, and the, you know, and issues around Shekinah and Pentecost sort of inspired topic, I think.
I will do my absolute best to join you all. Pamela, thank you so much for the invite.
Okay,
Welcome
thank
to
you.
Secure
Great to
Everybody,
see you,
and
Dave.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Dave. Thank
Take
you.
Bye.
We don't know Pamela, who we have another lady on here called Pam. And
Oh, that's me.
is that you as well?
Yeah. Dinah got my frazzled rant. From the time I picked up your email, and then my laptop couldn't pick up the internet, and after resetting routers and laptop, finally I thought, no, my work computer has been working, but that one can't see the emails because I'm blocked out by my company. Oh. So I've had my work computer running as my alternate self, just in case this one fails.
Good, but I just thought we actually double the numbers by having another Pam on board.
No.
I wanted to ask Dinah. She's like a wise owl sitting there absorbing information, which is good. What are your thoughts on what you're learning? Is anything new to you, too spectacular, too mind-blowing, or are you okay with what we're discussing?
Yeah, it is. If I'm honest, it is mind-blowing. I like the way that that the information, Gnosticism is, you know, it's unique. It's not original, but it is original. So, you know, you're finding your own truth, I think, or you're finding the truth, not your own truth, but the truth, from what has been presented from Gospels about Jesus, or any saints or religions. And I mean, they're all saying the same thing, really, obviously, and just different. It's just through different words. But yeah, I'm just, I find it is mind-blowing. You know, I'm thinking it is highly, I feel like, you know, you need to be intellectual, well, intellectual, but, you know, very intelligent to know Gnosticism, but it's very grounding. You know, there is something to it. So it is very grounding. And I think, yeah, for me, it's having that self-compassion in between it as well.
It's a lifelong process, Dinah, of learning more and more, and not just learning. It's assimilating that information, understanding it, and interpreting it in your own model of spirituality. The other thing I wanted to ask you is your main focus, what lights your floats your boat? Is it Jesus? Is that your focus, the interest about the Christ? Is that?
At the moment, Jesus, my son's really into Jesus, and I think that's because of me. So I'm kind of I'm open to what unfolds itself to me right now, and seeing where I'm being led.
Have you looked at the Pistis of Sophia or the Gospel of Thomas, for example?
I have dived into a few of the Pistis Sophia, the Gospel of Thomas, but I've not found one concrete. Yes, this is one I want to stay focused on, or maybe I'm waiting for someone to tell me this is what you need to do. I think I'm so used to being told what I need to do instead of just in that guidance. And it's okay to go off on another path and then come back to another path. But So but Pistis Sophia, I am really interested in.
Yeah, I think the Pistis Sophia probably, I think it's in many ways it's one of the better books. It's giving kind of an all around Gnostic look to it, but also giving there's visionary ascent, there's prayers, there's a number of things in there that makes the Pistis Sophia a real wonderful book. And when I first started, a lot of the writers in academias were really questionable about this Pistis Sophia, but I think in recent years things have turned around and they recognize that this is, it's possibly parts of it are from different eras, but it does represent really a lot of the Egyptian Gnostic viewpoints. But I do like it. At different points, I put in a little sketch for a program, hypothetical program for like a church, for like mainstream Christians, kind of picturing my mother. If I had to teach Gnosticism to my mother, how would I do this? My mother being a cradle Lutheran. And I actually put together a little reference of kind of what I would consider to be kind of a Gnostic light. Light, kind of light, both ways, but more light, L-I-T-E, that would kind of introduce Gnosticism through like the Gospel of Thomas, then Philip, and then Mary Magdalene. I think those three, they have thought-provoking things in there, but they don't really have anything that is real confrontational about anybody who's coming from a thinking, non-literist Christian background. And there's some books, especially like Philip Le-Loup's book on Mary Magdalene, on the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It's absolutely wonderful. Because he goes through comparing a lot of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene to the Beatitudes in a way and in a sensitivity that I don't think anyone else has done. And I believe that I'm not quite sure, I'd have to look whether he's a Jesuit, but he is a Roman Catholic priest. So he's also written on Thomas and on Philip. So he goes into them, but with kind of this more of this sort of open arm, rather than a lot of the Gnostic writers who are saying like, okay, this is something else. And he says, no, this is just an alternate gospel from more of a indwelling Christ perspective.
Some very talented people. Your friend there, David, who came on, very articulate, a good orator, good storyteller, quite a wordsmith, really, very descriptive I enjoyed the things he said. I can imagine him giving a good sermon. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. I've never really. I heard him talk in kind of an interview program once, and I didn't catch the whole thing. But I'm going to try to make it to his talk on Blavatsky on the 23rd. So
It's going to be on Zoom.
it will be on Zoom, and it's through the European School of Theosophy, which runs free, open to everybody, non-members, classes, both on lectures, both on Zoom and then also on YouTube channel, because they started going over their Zoom numbers.
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
But I'll get the link to it. I'll send it to everybody on our list.
Yeah, please. It's really good. I was going to say, if you can recommend any books to Dinah.
Yeah, let me get the one here. Right.
You'll find that this is the Indian one. It's all about love, meditation, the mind. Maybe it's one. You can actually get a PDF online, but you can probably buy the hard copy for about £4. This is your very interesting. You'll get absorbed by this. It's deep. It's to do with the mind, the light, love. Well worth putting in your collection.
Thank you.
And there are many others, but you've got the rest of your life to study.
Thank you for saying it like that.
Well, once the bug is bitten you, your quest, your thirst for knowledge will continue. And you'll find you can do cross correlations between this and different aspects of Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism. You will see the commonality the more you read, but you read these things over and over again, because the first time it won't sink in, you won't understand, but eventually, a few years later, it clicks what they're saying, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. And have you got this one, Dinah? Oh, sorry.
It's okay. This is one too. This is the one I was talking about by Johnny Leloup.
Mary Magdalene.
Yeah, and it's this gospel. He goes through the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but he brings it in with ideas around the Beatitudes. And I thought he's done it in a very beautiful way. And he really poured his heart and soul into it. After this, he wrote one on Gospel of Philip, which wasn't near as good. And then somebody convinced him to roll out another one on Thomas right after that, which I couldn't even bring myself to buy. And I'm quite the bibliophile, so it doesn't seem much. But this was quite wonderful.
What's the author's name?
Jean-Yves Leloup.
Okay. Oh, Jean. Okay. Jean.
Yeah.
So he's a French guy.
Yeah, he's a French guy, and he says he's founder of the Institute of Other Civilization Studies and the International College of Therapists. It's like the founder of the Institute of Other Civilization Studies. I just noticed, like, what is that? Yeah. That deserves a Google, I guess.
It reminds me of someone in a film. They came up with, they were being interrogated. And who are you? We're the Raspberry Pi Reading Club. You know, it's an amazing title there. The founder.
So what else were you showing up? Something else there?
I was just showing because Dinah, this is the Gnostic Eucharist, what we use, the Gnostic Holy Eucharist. What Stephen Holler uses, and we tend to use, don't we, Pamela?
Yeah.
And I wonder if you've got this. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. The Gnostic Holy Eucharist. I don't think I have. No.
Okay. I will put it on the Gnostic Cafe, on our WhatsApp Gnostic Cafe for you. Or you can email me, or I think I've sent a copy to Pamela some time ago.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look at it. I think I've got a PDF of it. I know I had an old hard copy around here.
I sent a PDF. I haven't got one PDF. I had to scan it. I couldn't find a way to put it together. So it's about 18 pages of PDF. And we have a Gnostic Mass on a Sunday night, 9 o'clock. That's from Seattle. We have Father Sam and Mother Andrea. Pamela and myself, we were thinking about doing a mini Gnostic Mass.
Yeah, a virtual one.
Yeah. I'm sure we can do one, because you did one the other week, Pamela, didn't you?
Yeah, I did once for Holy Week.
Yeah.
And I think it would be nice when we get groups together again.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, your mass is on video, is on YouTube.
Yeah, I posted everything up on YouTube. So, and need to get some better camera things, etc. But yeah, I would like to see more of that being done and more sharing that way. I think another thing, to get back to your point about the sacraments, I was talking to my Taoist friend Robert,
Yeah.
who still bears scars from being raised a Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
And he commented to me about how there's no mysticism or magical in the Christian Eucharist, Christian Mass. And I said, no. and I pointed out to him that it's the part of the problem is that people aren't taught. So you have people who are sensitive to the subtleties and the spirituality that happens in the Mass. But then unfortunately, most people aren't really told about what you should do as a participant, let alone a priest, but what you should do as a participant during the Mass to get the most out of it. Mm. And I think, especially like in mainstream churches, like Roman Catholic, like Lutheran, where people just go there as a duty, they feel that's something they have to do, and don't recognize what's spiritually available to them, about how you really need to. Lutherans have something called justification, which means that you should really be at peace with yourself before you take communion. So to do part of that is maybe some contemplation, self-reflection before the service starts, but then actually to use the words of confession and the absolution to internally rid yourself of any sort of burden of sin or other negative thoughts you have. And then after that, begin to participate in this sort of building oneness that happens at the communion table, at the sacrament. Now, of course, by reading Leadbeater, you get far more with the idea of the angel of the presence and the power building. And then if one is in some of the churches, like when I was living in Harvey, our choir, and a lot of people had come from more of a Pentecostal background into the Lutheran. So there was this understanding at a certain part where you can raise energy up through song and dance. Well, more through song. Mm. And so everything would build up into this energy crescendo, and then you have the Eucharist. And when you're in those sorts of places, it's easy to see what Leadbeater's talking about the angel coming down, and about about spirit being blazed up. But I think, unfortunately, most people don't really recognize that. And it would be fun to do a Mass where someone actually is explaining this. things.
Yeah.
And explaining what as a congregation should really happen. You know?
I'm always fascinated with what Leadbeater. I'm very grateful for what Leadbeater did. I mean, you think the guy was born 1856. I think he wrote that 600-page document about the turn of the century. It is 69 in total, 69 books. And he was talking about vibrations even then, you know, which is what the Buddhists and the Hindus talk about, body, subtle vibration, subtle body. But he's talking about in terms of frequencies. And when you look at the mass and the asperges, he's creating an electromagnetic field. And I had a discussion with my son, who's just finished off a master's at Lancaster University on quantum physics and mathematics. And I used to, when I was at university, I did electromechanics. And to me, this is an electromagnetic effect that the Holy Spirit responds to. And when I read what Leadbeater describes, and I analysed it with my son Jamie mathematically in terms of a thing called right-hand, left-hand rule, mutual induction, all these sort of things. What Leadbeater is talking about is creating a negative. I didn't twig onto this to begin with. He's talking about a negative suction electromagnetic field. I thought at the beginning it was a positive one, but then I thought, well, how can that be? If a positive one's coming down, like magnets, they push against each other. What this is, it's an attraction. You're creating a suction effect, a negative. It's like an aircraft wing. That's a profile of a wing. And what happens because of the shape of the bird's wing or an aircraft, you've got low pressure here, you've got high pressure here, and it lifts. So if you turn around upside down, you're creating a low magnetic field, a negative one that sucks it in. And it's the science of this. And that's why he called it the science of the sacrament, because it is a science. And an art as well. And the priest being a conduit for all this. But that's the fascinating thing. If he can explain it that way, then maybe the other rituals have an element of electromagnetism in there. And, the swirling around of in a dance, a spiritual dance, maybe that's doing some effect. The arms, the pirouettes. So everything fascinates me, because it could be a method where we can reach salvation quicker or better or more guaranteed, or while we're here, we can touch that divinity or have it touch us by understanding this science. So I think you're quite right, Pamela. If that could be explained, what Leadbeater explained so well, and his pictures that he put in there for that period, he's got the way the bubble actually expands down the church. And I said on the 9 o'clock mass with what we have with Seattle, I said to Simon, who's doing the mass, and Andrea, I said, your bubble now goes right across America, right across the Atlantic, in through Great Britain into Norway. I said, you've got a big bubble, and because that's the way it works. It may not be so powerful, because the more people you have in that, the higher the density, of course, But the thing is, it does spread over that direction. And he asked me, can I feel it? I don't know if maybe it was just too subtle, but I believe it does envelope. Yes. But yeah, that would be a good one to explain.
Would be interesting to be doing that, with a group, because it also offers in the service that even though, even if you have this sort of understanding, you can go into any church where the mass is being done and experience something like that. Okay, you go into a Church of God down in the little pit village where I used to live, it's not so much. But if you have that understanding, and I was in Montserrat, where they have the Cathedral of the Black Madonna, Montserrat, and the mass is done in Catalan, which is the most beautiful, religious service experience I'd ever been in, because Catalan has the most, has the best of French and Spanish, And I was there with a friend, and we had tears running down our eyes, and it was this really powerful thing. You know, so there's gradients of how it could be experienced, but you could experience it some level. You know, even in little Langley Park at the COG service.
This might be. I did a presentation on the Gnostic Cafe to do with this. So to do with the way vibration functions on karma rebirth, where we get, it's an entanglement. Law of karma is entanglement theory, and it's an energy, and it's called a wave function in quantum physics, and it's an aura which we have our own body frequencies. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
You know, all our organs, they apparently they communicate with each other using vibrations, frequencies, and the brain has a different frequency to the heart, and it's like electromagnetic energy. And there's references here. There's a woman who's very good, a New Zealand woman called Professor Susan Pocket, and then we have a guy down in Surrey University, Professor John Joe. Lots of work on this type of thing. And basically, this is your magical 6 feet that you may have heard about, because the body aura, electromagnetic form, goes 6 feet around the body. How does this work with merit? What we talked about, good karma, vibration. How does that work? Gnostic Handbook, Lorimer. How does it work with prayers and meditation? Why do our prayers have an effect? I mean, I know a prayer will have an effect. I know if I pray, but why does it do it? And this is explained by the electromagnetic field, how it connects with the one, the Father. We know this from that Japanese guy who did prayers on water using, and he did using different music. You can see that what happens to water crystal with Mozart or with Imagine John Lennon or Love. But what happens when you, before prayer on the right hand side, Fujiwara, and when you say hateful things to water, and we're made of water. So imagine when you say nasty things to people, this is what happens to our molecules. So it's all connected. There's your quantum physics guy, Feynman Path.
Yeah, Feynman.
Yeah, the Feynman path of life, electromagnetic waves, how it works that way. This is how your prayers work on something distant. So we can pray and have an effect on somebody far away.
I saw this, I heard this interesting talk. Well, it was mostly the guy was showing his video, and I'll send that out to you guys too. But it was one I saw last week when I was at the conference for this on the 7 rays. But he was using some of these, well, he was talking a little bit about the whole electric universe theory.
Yes.
But he was also talking about the power of water and the vibration.
Yes. In
the idea of how the physical body forms from the etheric body in between incarnations, using some of Alice Bailey's material. And it was quite interesting, you know, and because, and kind of making a link, you know, between plasma and plasma, you know, that this wasn't an accidental thing, but, you know, on the level of the vibrations. But it was one of the better ideas I had seen, because he'd used a similar sort of talking about the water, you know, as far as this sort of transfer mechanism. Yeah.
But very believable, Pam. I'm going to have to get my tea now. It's a bit late. I know I'm about.
Yeah, I think we all need to go. I'm just keeping everybody. It gets fun though.
Yeah, it's fun. I've enjoyed it because we're talking about something deeply spiritual and that we all understand and love, and we're sharing that belief, and it's really nice. The knowledge, you know. Dinah, I'm glad you joined us tonight.
Yeah, good to see you, Dinah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here with you all. I'm not in the Gnostic Cafe. I don't know if you'd like my number or.
If you, how can I give you my number? If I go into chat, I can put my number down, okay? Can you
Okay.
see this? 1 second. If you send me a text message, I'll send you a link.
Okay.
Let me just put that so I can see. Okay. So my number is 07980 545 231. Dana, can you see that?
I can. 07980 545.
I'll connect you to the Buddhist cafe as well.
Okay.
We have Buddhist, well, the friends of mine, they're from Thailand. We set up a Buddhist cafe and they do meditation every night from different parts of the world, different Buddhist monks from Thailand. You might enjoy that.
Okay. Thank
And,
you.
you might enjoy the Gnostic cafe. I think Pamela's on the Gnostic cafe.
I am, but I rarely do WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So,
I rarely do WhatsApp as well, but it's good to probably get different messages. The norm, especially if it's spiritual and uplifting. Yeah, and positive.
all right.
Ladies,
Yeah.
Pamela.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thank you,
Thank you for a
everybody.
wonderful presentation, Warren.
Yeah,
It
thank you,
was
Warren.
wonderful.
Thanks, Dinah. And we'll
Thank
see. Send something out for 2 weeks.
Thank you, Pam.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.